Hi, I'm Sydney, and I am a servant of the Almighty God. Today, I want to speak a little bit about things that we take for granted. And as part of this series on recognizing God's omnipotence, things that we take for granted, but really are miracles, miracles of creation that make it possible for life here on earth. There are a couple of things I want to get into. One is water. And water, of course, is something, it's everywhere, right? But it is an amazing, I like to think of water as a miracle substance. Without water, life as we know it does not exist. And you can do your own research, but I don't want to get real technical about this, but water has some amazing properties that enable life itself. It's so important. Things like the blood flowing through your veins, the blood that transports oxygen. Okay, all of that needs the special properties of water. One of the things that I like to point out, again, and these are things that we take for granted, because this is the beauty. It's kind of like, I have been a software engineer for a long time. And when you build beautiful code, it's seamless. People do things without even thinking about it. It's like when you use your phone, if you have to stop and do the things, then it's like, where there's a lot of friction getting from one place to the next, then it's difficult. You don't like that. We've advanced to the point where we build things, frictionless. And, if we want you to stick around, then, we make it sticky, where it's easy to go from one place to the next. Well, we are very primitive when we contrast our designs. And again, I like to always mention that the best designs we do are in chips, right? Silicon based or the element based. When we look out there and we see His omnipotence manifested, it's in living things. We see DNA, we see genes, we see the ability to evolve, where decisions are being made. We don't know, but with our stuff, with our AI, we have a database in some media and the ability to interrogate that and make decisions and then add to it so that it becomes it learns on its own. That same capability we can observe. But none of this would be possible without water. And one of the amazing, so water has all these amazing properties that enable, like I said, life itself. One of the things, as an example of something that we take for granted, the fact that water becomes lighter as it freezes. So most compounds, as it that exists in a liquid form, as it becomes a solid, it gets heavier. Right? You think about it. Water, any liquid besides water, as it you take steel or any other compound, and you get the liquid form because you have the three different phases, right? It could be a gas, a liquid, and we naturally assume, because that's what we observe, as it goes from a gas to a liquid to a solid, it gets heavier. Water does not, right? You have clouds, right, consists of water. It of course it gets heavier. It falls as rain, but when it's in the liquid form, as it gets colder, it gets heavier. And so, using the Celsius temperature scale, it exists as above 100 degrees. It exists as in a gas, well, depending on the pressure, of course, but just not to be too crazy about the science of it. It exists above a certain temperature as a gas. As it gets cooler, it turns into a liquid. If you keep cooling that liquid, which is what happens with the weather and the change of the seasons, it gets heavier and heavier until it gets about 4 degrees. Around zero, generally, it turns to ice. But around 4 degrees, it's at its heaviest. So as it turns into a solid, it's lighter. This is why ice floats. So when you look at a pond, a river, the oceans, ice floats. And so, if you've looked at some programs where they have, trucks driving over the ice because you have this thick, layer of ice that's formed, that is all lighter than water, so it stays above the water. Why am I harping on this? Because that is extremely important. If water behaved like every other compound, things would freeze from the bottom up. So you would not have fishes existing. You would not have anything that lives under the ice. So that we are not able to create a compound with that property. We just can't. I mean, we think we're really advanced, but really we are so primitive by comparison with the omnipotence that is manifested and we can observe around us. So water is a miracle compound that supports life. There are many other unique properties that, like I said, goes into our blood and goes, the capillary reaction and adhesion and cohesion and a lot of other properties that water has that supports life. So the Almighty created this amazing compound that is so important to us. I want to get into something else slightly different, but that again it's extremely important for life here on Earth. The ozone layer. You've heard about the ozone layer. And the ozone layer, it's basically, we have, oxygen. Well, this molecule that can have two of them, which we know as oxygen. And then you have this special bond where they bond three of them, that's ozone. But high above the Earth, there is this layer where this gas goes through, from oxygen to ozone, and things may break it down, but then it reforms. So this is an ongoing process. And why is that so important? Because without that layer, we know that we would get certain radiation that comes from the sun that would possibly destroy all life on Earth. Well, it's like, we know that with man, that's what we see. With God, it's very possible, but life would not exist in the forms that we know of, because with God, He can engineer life forms that obviously would exist with those conditions. But for us, it's like in the Bible says, I think it's Matthew 2:6, right? He, just like the birds and the animals out there that don't sow and don't reap, He loves them, and so he demonstrates that by ensuring that there is an ecosystem that supports them. Similarly for us, this is part of the ecosystem that He has designed that supports us. And so as our knowledge grows, we would recognize these special capabilities, these special properties, and in that magical engineering of this ecosystem that supports us. We need to recognize this. We need to recognize the special engineering that supports us. This is the manifestation of his omnipotence. I will go and this seems like, again, we attribute this to nature. But as I go into more stuff, especially with the animals, when I go into coloration and special adaptations and specialization that we observe in plants and animals around us, it will become more clear that absolutely there is intelligent design. These things are not random. And I always challenge random by saying, if random was that important in the processes, if nature and random work together, we should be able to find relics of it. And the challenge, and I want to get a challenge out there that says anyone who can demonstrate a process, a truly random process, and as a software engineer from a long time, I would say it has to be totally unpredictable and unrepeatable. When we see patterns like we see with the ozone layer, when we see wonderful design, we must recognize there is intelligence. Order, if we are traveling and we see just, a hodgepodge of things, we may say, well, that's just stuff. But when you see things aligned properly, like we see with water, when we see like the ozone layer, we see there is a process that we were totally unaware of until recently. And again, our science is not that old. There are so many other processes that occur around us. It's interesting that during these times, I like to say that we are getting better with his revelations to us, along with the gifts that he's given us, the things that we take for granted, like I said, water, the ozone layer, the gifts that he's given us, over time, it makes us better. Something as simple as, crime. Now with DNA and, touch DNA, all the things that facilitates, having video everywhere. So all of these things are his revelations to us. The ability to use silicon, which was always there. Silicon has been around forever from our standpoint. So has lithium and sodium and sulfur. All of these elements that were revealed in the periodic table to Dmitry Mendeleev in, was it 1869? Yeah. So all of these, 16, sorry. So it's all of these things have been there forever. And so these things are given to us as inspirations. And it's these inspirations that are at the base of this book. Humanity's inflection point. I go into a lot of details on the things how our societies will change and become better. One of the things you will observe is that people seem to think that a lot of our current leaders, they seem to think that we are in this loop, that civilization is in a loop. We are bound to repeat the past. But they are also the ones who are now telling us that, no, there is no God. All the intelligence and benevolence that we observe in the design of our ecosystem, that is based on some amorphous, nebulous, that no one can define exactly, point to say, this is nature. They say, that's nature, because they do not want to be accountable. When we accept God, we accept his designs, we become God-fearing and we can move forward. We are not doomed to repeat those cycles. We need to recognize his omnipotence. We need to recognize that we all exist in the presence of the living God. That changes us. You know how we all, when we are conscious that we are being observed, we tailor our behaviors. And that's the point. It's unfortunate that so many religions are focused on teaching and focusing us on something that's 2,000 years ago. And so religion becomes less and less relevant to our day-to-day lives. But when we recognize that the water that we use, the water that sustains us, the ozone layer that protects us, these are the manifestations of the omnipotence of the Almighty God. And when we feel the wind, when we feel the weather, we see the trees, we see animals, we recognize that as manifestations of His omnipotence. It changes us because we learn that we are in His presence. We all exist and in His presence, and we are all His creations. We learn to care. We understand accountability. This is what is important and what will change us and move us forward and break the cycle of that war and endless wars and divisiveness and hate, and allow the demons of deception, hate, greed, and lust to be so prominent in our world. I want to thank you for taking this time, and if you can, please check out some of the other episodes in this series. And remember, this is not a coincidence. You got into this by design. Somewhere, somehow, something was connected. And so you are here and you've connected to this. And I hope that you will build your own personal relationship. It's not about any proxy, not your cleric, your pastor, your rabbi. This is about you building a personal relationship with the living God. I'm Sydney, and I want to thank you for taking the time. And until, may God bless.